Good afternoon, everyone. I am delighted to be here today with Tim Sanders, who I met on Monday evening at an event in Wimbledon, which was featuring Dr. Erica Mallory Blythe, who's one of the leading UK's spokespeople on EMFs and 5G and radiation. And Tim had some brilliant contributions for the audience from a scientific perspective of how radiation is affecting our cells. And he's going above and beyond what we're learning about from Dr. Martin Paul, who many of you have seen his science. He's the one who's pretty famous for saying putting in millions of 5G antennae without a single biological safety test has got to be the stupidest idea in the history of the world. So he's done some thorough testing. He's the Professor Emeritus of Biochemistry at Washington State University. We're going to be talking about him and how the radiation, non-ionizing radiation affects our cells. And Tim's going to really explain more into this and his own research, which is just fascinating about how it affects the body at the cellular level. So, Tim, thank you so much for coming onto this broadcast. I'm really happy to have you here. I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation. I want just before I say this, before I welcome you again, what I really want to get across in this interview is the idea that we are electrical beings. We are vibrational beings, and everything about us is electrical and energetic. And that's what Tim's going to really speak to today. So, Tim, thank you. Welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to share this knowledge. Yeah, absolutely. It's about time we started to think of ourselves in a different context because of what's happening. You know, there's that famous Tesla phrase, you know, the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, vibration. Well, right now we've got a lot of imbalanced and offensive energy, vibration and frequency hitting our cells, and we need to understand why that's compromising the balance and the vibration of our cells, because ultimately that's going to end up in disease and complications and compromise.
Yeah, it's a very, very important conversation, this. It's very easy to forget that we are electrical beings, and it's easy to forget that we aren't these intelligent meat robots. We're way more than that. And I loved our conversation earlier. You were talking about the same language as I use a lot. And you talked about how we're antenna, you know, we're receiving and transmitting all the time on an energetic level. And I'd love to.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you know, it's been proven by the University of Heart Math that we've got like these electrical fields, one very strong to about here that are coming from our heart, and then another one about 12 feet out or whatever. So there's electricity running all of our functions, but what we're going to get into a bit later on is that our cells actually are electrical current themselves.
Yes.
And this is all based on the theories and the concepts of a scientist that I met, whose science I'm representing today, called Dr. Ilya Lakisevich, but I call him Lackey, he calls himself Lackey. But yeah, the net effect is that we are giant electrical antennas walking around, and we're reacting to everything that we see and experience. You know, we're reacting to sunlight, we're reacting to good food, to good music has a reaction in our bodies. You know, we've all felt those tingles when we hear really moving music and so on. But we also react to the bad things in the same way, like the toxins or the chemicals or, you know, car exhaust fumes. You know, our body starts to wince or whatever. And also phone radiation or wireless radiation. Our bodies are reacting in the same way, and we can prove that. We can show you that. It's very simple to prove. I spend a lot of my time doing muscle tests and things like that, where we show that the body's electrical circuitry is compromised by the very, very strong radiation fields that we've got in these things. You know, if you put an electromagnetic frequency meter against that, it goes off the charts. They're incredibly powerful things. So the debate has always been about, you know, in the science world, ionizing, non-ionizing, therefore non-ionizing can't harm you. And I'm here to say, well, actually, not only has that been proven to be not correct, as in there's been at least 6 or even, maybe even 10,000 peer-reviewed studies that are showing non-thermal effects on rats, but also we have to get closer to the reason why that's happening, because without a reason for that to be happening, no one's really taking us seriously. And that's where I feel that the gap has been filled in, because we have the science, like you mentioned earlier on, Dr. Martin Paul, saying that around the cell there's a membrane which looks after how much calcium gets into the cell, right? It's a little membrane that controls all the minerals that get into the cell. And that gets super excited by EMF, electromagnetic frequencies, and therefore it lets too much calcium in, and then there's an imbalance in the cell, a nitrosative, oxidative stress disorder, which leads to free radicals. But basically it means that the cell's under attack or under stress. And from then on, you know, it's struggling to deal with something on an immune level. But what we're saying is, why did that VGCC layer react to the EMF in the first place, right? Voltage gated calcium channel. Yeah.
Because this is the main point.
And it's just the bit around the cell that lets in, that controls and regulates the levels of calcium and the minerals, because those have to be kept in a certain balance. You know, everything in the body, as we're going to come to, is all about balance. So it's a very clever system that your body regulates, and that gets that system of control gets compromised by the electromagnetic frequencies.
Brilliant. Yeah, we need to. Yeah,
I
mean, this thing that you just mentioned is huge, because I don't think people are understanding how this is affecting the body at the cellular level, and how sensitive our cells are to these EMFs. And you know, there's the telecoms companies are sticking to all this science that says it's totally safe, and I think that's so irresponsible. They're ignoring the actual science about, you only have to put a petri dish of sperm next to your phone and have a microscope to see what happens to the sperm under a microscope next to your cell phone, next to the mobile phone. It's evident what happens. The sperm will start going in different directions, and everything changes. And there's been tons of studies on this. There's been studies on what happens to the cells when you walk within a meter of a smart meter, and they start degrading extremely fast. And the evidence is solid. It couldn't be more solid. So I hope.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to give our version as to why that happens. And we've touched on it earlier on, which is that we are walking around as electrical antennae. And as soon as we get closer to something that is like an imbalanced form of energy, then we absorb that energy. And then from then on, our bodies are dealing with that stress. And then from then on, we have Dr. Martin Paul's work, which is a biological observation of what happens when that stress happens, you know, what happens in the cell. So we're going to go even before that and have a look at why, as electrical beings, or electrical circuits or electrical antennae, we then pick up, what do we pick up from a weak radiation field? And why does that then happen? And one of the things I'll say right now is that it's because we are in the same frequency band as those frequencies that are coming at us, right? So I always give the analogy of two guitars, right? And if you get two guitars with all the same strings, like, you know, G string, A string, B string, whatever, and you pluck, for example, the E string on one guitar, then the other E string will start to resonate with that other string, right? It picks up the resonance and it starts to vibrate. Now, that's what happens to our bodies when we go near to these frequencies. We start to pick them up and resonate with them. But then it's about, what is it about the quality of the radiation field that is going to cause harm in the human cell? And what Dr. Lakisevich has found is that it's nothing to do with heat or energy, which is what, you know, ionizing versus non-ionizing is all about. And don't get me wrong, that's not wrong, but it's just not the full picture, right? You can't judge everything based on heat. There must be something else in the quality of the radiation field. And he believes that it's all about the centeredness and the balance of that radiation field. If it's like the sun, for example, then it's centered and balanced. But if it's like a radiation field from a cell tower, it has an imbalanced quality and it has an uncenteredness, which your body picks up. And from then on, you're under vibrational compromise. So yeah, we've got some slides that can illustrate this.
I think it's going to be very useful to see the visuals as we do this. So I'm now going to add your slides to the broadcast.
Yeah, so just the title is our view on why human cells react to microwave radiation fields from wireless devices. And it's the science behind the vibrational and resonant effects of radiation on the human body. So yeah, it's looking at things from a vibrational and a resonant and an electric perspective, which is much needed as we discussed earlier. So if you go on to the next slide, this is actually something that I've done on my own blood. There we go.
Can you see it?
So, yeah. So basically, on the left, what you'll see is a baseline. So this is my blood. Basically, I've done this test on myself, and the reason is because I'm also an entrepreneur. I set up a company around this science because we have a solution to this problem, which is Omnia Radiation Balancer, which is a patch you put on your phone to harmonize all the radiation fields. But on the left-hand side is my blood after turning everything off overnight, and I go in, and it's supposed to look like nice and circular space around the outside. And if you look at that that picture there, it's actually in negative form, as in whites are whites and blacks are and darks are whites. Did I say that right? Whites are darks and darks are whites. So it's the negative. What you're seeing there on the screen is the negative portrayal.
Oh,
now,
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So in the center of all the cells on the left-hand side, you see this white light, but actually that's darkness. So it's the inverse. In the middle section, you see what happens after I've watched a video on a mobile phone for 20 minutes. Basically, all the blood cells adhere to each other and they stick to each other, and this causes complications in the body. That's just after 20 minutes of using a mobile phone, right? And that's on 4G, by the way.
That's a really interesting point you just made. That's on 4G alone.
Right.
So the 5G is, yeah,
10 times, right? At least. Some people say it's going up to 30 or 40 times, but let's just say 10 times, because I know it starts at 24 gigahertz, which is and 4G goes up to about 2.6 gigahertz, for example. So let's say it's just about 9 or 10 times. So yeah, that's what happens. I mean, obviously these are snapshots, but I've got a full video of like 5 minutes of the baseline, 5 minutes of the affected sample, and then 5 minutes of the sample when we treat it with the Omnia Radiation Balancer. But what we're doing in this video is trying to show you why the blood goes from the blue sample or the left-hand sample to the one in the middle. We want to show why that happens, because we've got a theory about why that is. So if we move to the next slide, we can go into that. So yeah, on a healthy, balanced, aligned, centered cell, this is a picture from inside the body. So this is real. This is like what we saw last slide was the negative version, and this is the real version. What you've got is basically a bunch of blood cells inside the body as they're photographed. And you can see that they're all like little donuts, right? And they're little donuts of light. So this is the theory of Dr. Lakisevich that I'm going to tell you all about now. So if we roll to the next image, that just describes what these are. So within the center of each donut, what he's found is what he calls the 0-point field. And that 0-point field, we put an illustration at the bottom of that to just show that it's geometrically in the center of the whole donut. And what it's doing is it's holding the shape of that perfectly round donut, right? And that is very, very important to our health. So a healthy cell will look like that really nicely shaped plump donut with the 0-point keeping it in balance. And that balance is what's compromised by the radiation field, right? So in very simple terms, if something that's very balanced meets something that's imbalanced, then it becomes imbalanced itself if it's resonating with that imbalanced field. So that's the message we're trying to get across to people, is that on a vibrational level, that plump donut that you can see there is compromised, as we saw in the previous slide when all of the blood started to stick together. So there are qualities to this donut that I could go on and on about, but I think we should just keep it pretty simple for now and not go into too much of his concepts, because he's writing a book about the true concept of the atom, where he explains the radiation process of a healthy cell. Because believe it or not, that cell that we see there is actually going through two different processes. One is to make itself, to draw the energy from the 0 point field to make itself into a ball of electrical current, or a donut of electrical current. And then the next phase is to expand itself or to discharge itself to the ether. So it's making itself and discharging itself in rapid succession. That's what's happening to all your cells, drawing the energy from the 0 point field to make themselves, discharging to discharge itself to the ether. And that is very similar to breathing. So when you breathe in all of the prana, the oxygen to make all your cells. And when you breathe out discharge, toxins, and heat, right? So there's a similarity between the way that the cells behave and the way that we breathe, because there's echoes in everything that's natural. You know, everything that in the natural world has echoes within the way that the laws of nature function, right? So it's getting back to that knowledge and that understanding and almost that ownership of that healthy donut-shaped cell in our body, and understanding why that gets compromised, which is crucial right now because of the massive amount of frequencies that we're being constantly exposed to. We can't get away from. So yeah, if you go to the next part. There is some information coming up there about the 0 point and how it behaves and the light rings, but I think we'll get into that a bit later on, or in another discussion, because I just want to keep it relatively simple. So if we go to the next slide.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to say here is that if you looked at the top of a radiation field, and this is just a 2D representation, and you can see that the radiation field is like the 0 point is at the 1, or the little blue circle in the middle. What we're going to now show is the fact that the 0 point field in the middle starts to move around away from the geometric center of the wave field, right? So it's starting to move around, and it becomes almost like an agitated energy force. And again, remember that we said that we absorb this imbalanced energy, and then our energy inside becomes imbalanced itself. So we're going to show, if you just press the next slide, yeah, so it will move around so that the 0 point is now at position 3, and now it's back to 2, and now it goes up to 4 if you go on, and now it goes back to 2, and then it goes out to 5. So that's the way that a radiation field kind of moves around, and it isn't dialed into that 0 point that keeps the cell, the blood cell, nice and balanced. So what we're trying to do graphically here is just show some sort of 2D representation of a radiation field, which then comes into contact with a blood cell. And if you move it on one slide, in graphic terms, if we also look at the human blood cell as the yellow ring, right, and look at it from the top with the black point there as the 0 point field in the middle, and then we go one more slide. So yeah, and then obviously you can see the clear difference between that and the radiation field, as in the movement, the unalignment, the uncenteredness, etc. Then what we're saying is, this is what happens. Next slide. So on the left, you see the normally centered cell of the human being, of us. Then it meets the uncentered cell wave field of the radiation, and it picks up that uncenteredness. So it starts to move around a lot, and the 0 point starts to stray from the center and isn't directly dialed in. And the net effect of that is, next slide, what you see in the blood sample that I did on myself. That is what you see. You see it going from that nice centered shape to the imbalanced, compromised, shapeless form of what is called rouleau syndrome. So when blood all sticks together like that, it's called rouleau syndrome. And there are lots of things. I mean, it's not a disease in itself, but it's a precursor to basically complications, health complications or stress in the body. And basically means that blood cells can't move through the capillaries as freely as they normally can. So for me, this is information that should be shared, should be explored, and those concepts that I've just talked you through should be assessed and analysed for truth, because it seems that is the most likely explanation for why this is all happening. Yeah, I'll leave it there and answer any questions.
Can I? Yeah, can I? That's a really interesting presentation. I've not seen it like that, or presented like that. I've seen the video. I'm about to share the video, a live video of what happens to our cells, which is exactly the same as what you've just demonstrated. Right. I just want to accentuate the point that this is our cells. This is the makeup of all life form. We're 50 trillion cells, and it doesn't matter what symptom your body is displaying. It could be cancer, it could be a neurodegenerative disorder, it could be anxiety, it could be depression. If our cells are being affected like this, and it's also been shown that the DNA itself is damaged, that's all we need to really know about radiation. All of the studies about all the cancers, all the other, it doesn't really matter. They're just symptomatic of what's happening at the cellular level. And I think what you've just demonstrated is so important for people to understand, because it's everything. It's all life form. And what I want to do now is share the live video, and this is going to show people, the viewer, what happens to our cells when exposed to a smart meter. And you've just had the explanation from Tim Sanders about why this happens.
1 foot in front of the smart meter, and in every single case, the human energy field was obliterated as they stood in front of the smart meter. So in our first slides, what we see is normal cells, and the structure of the cells is intact and sound. Sample 1, you can see a lot of degradation in the cells. The cell walls have been broken, and you see changes in the cells which are called mycoplasma. It shows a mutation to the cell. In the second sample, we see a different type of degradation to the cell membranes. You can see a corrugation here. This is called bottle cap formation, and it's known that this occurs due to oxidation or exposure to free radicals. So this third subject, when we did her sample, she had to be pulled away from the meter after 45 seconds because she complained about an increasingly severe headache. And here you see a phenomenon called rouleau, where the red blood cells are stacking up.
I wanted to show that because everything you just talked about was just described in that 1 minute video. I think the viewer can see what happens to our cells when exposed to a smart meter for less than a minute.
Yeah.
And I hear that at Glastonbury Festival, people are already complaining about headaches. That's like the first sign of your cells being affected by the radiation. And of course, the organizers are going to go, oh, you just got too much sun, or you've just been drinking too much, or drugs, or whatever. They're just going to give some kind of excuse.
It's an easy out, isn't it? Yeah.
It's a very easy out. And I think as soon as we can understand what happens to the body at the cellular level, I think it's very useful to understand why it's happening, which is what you're helping with. I think it's very good to see the visuals, and you've shown what happens to your own cells as well as that video just shared. And it's indisputable. We can't argue this.
So the stills I showed you were from a video very similar to what you've just shown there. I think one of the differences is that someone was walking past a smart meter, and they were obviously picking up the vibes from the smart meter. Had they put their hand on the smart meter, as you well know, radiation is all about proximity, the strength of the signal, and exposure, right? So proximity, are we touching it? Are we typing on it? You know, how close are we? Strength of signal, is it going from 4G to 5G, which is like much, much more frenetic energy in short millimeter waves? And then exposure is like, how much time do you spend on your phone all day? Well, most people are on it about 7 or 8 hours. And the point is that if that's what it's doing to your blood, and I just want to make one thing clear, because lots of people go, that can't be true. That can't be true, that only 20 minutes has just stuck all your blood together like that. I'll just say that we are, as human beings, incredibly resilient, right? We should not underestimate our body's strength at actually dealing with a compromise, a toxin or whatever. You know, lots of people can drink or smoke or abuse their bodies for years and years and years before they give in. But the point is that it is happening. The toxins are present in the radiation field, and the toxins are being dealt with by the body. So that's why I set up a brand around the solution that Dr. Lakisevich has, because when I tested it, I found that I reversed those rouleau syndromes in my own blood. And I thought, well, this is something that people need to know about, and I thought, well, this is a message that has to be shared. And, I don't want to be pointing fingers at corporations or anyone else like that, because I genuinely think that no one really understands why this is happening. I think this is literally sort of what I've described to you here is potentially breakthrough knowledge that hasn't really been considered before, because, mainstream science is stuck in the biological world. It's stuck in the chemical world, the everything else, and it doesn't maybe give enough credence to the energy and the vibrational side of the human body, which is what we're trying to show here. And everything that you see in those blood cells and their behavior represents vibrational or electrical compromise. That's what's happening there. Yeah,
it's everything, isn't it? I mean, vibration is everything. Frequency is everything.
Right.
And
all life is vibrating, is whatever. I mean, even this table that underneath me is vibrating. It's following exactly the same pattern as our cells, as in it's a little donut of light or whatever, and it's vibrating with a different frequency, which gives it the illusion of hardness. But of course, there's a big difference between my body and this table, which is that I've got a mind which can move my body around, right? But also I'm different makeup. I've got a liver. I've got all sorts of we've all got all sorts of complex organs in our body which perform extraordinary functions without us knowing it.
Yeah, all at different frequencies. Everything happens at different frequencies. You give the example, which is why the Rife method works, with getting rid of cancers at various different frequencies.
Right.
And that was suppressed in the early 30s by the American Medical Association, but we won't go into that right now. Water has a different vibration. If you've seen Dr. Emoto and the water experiments, you can see they can clearly show scientifically, very clearly, what happens to the crystals with different emotional exposures. So if water is exposed to the vibration of love or appreciation or beautiful classical music, the water crystals have a very different formation. Whereas if they're exposed to ones of hate and heavy metal music and dark stuff, there's no perfection in the creation of these crystals. If you can imagine a snowflake, that's what Dr. Emoto is showing, what happens to the water crystals when exposed to love. And the opposite happens. There's all horrible, nasty composition when exposed to the ones of hate, for example. So we are...
And just on that note, water absorbs radiation, that is one of the reasons why children suffer more from radiation effects is because they've got higher water content in their body, right? And
women,
right? There you go. So and then
women,
organs in the body that are more dense with water, like the brain is soaking wet with water, and so there are organs that are more at risk. And just on the Dr. Emoto thing, we do 3 tests on our product. And the last one is that we basically take 3 samples, 1 baseline, so we don't touch that. The second one, we put a phone on top and we irradiate the water, and that comes out all chaotic in structure. And then the third one, we put our patch on the phone and put it on the top of the water, and then it comes out perfectly crystalline. And, it's basically harmonize the water. But again, the structure of the water, like you're talking about in the snowflake, is balance. It's that perfect hexagonal structure and balance. And that is what our bodies are always trying to get back to when they're encountered with a stress or when they encounter a stress. Even water is trying to get back to that perfect balance. It's filled with chlorine or whatever it is, which cleans the water up. So that's it's just really fundamental. Sometimes like things can be almost too simple. It's like, is the water in your body structured and balanced? If it is, then you'd be nice and balanced and healthy yourself. Is it compromised by a radiation field that gives it a chaotic structure and so on? Well, if that's the case, then we need to work out how we can get that back to the nice structure and the geometry that is intended in nature, right?
Everything's geometry. It's fascinating.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a thought that you had just talking about, energy and crystalline structures of, the water crystals, and going back to our cells again. It reminds me, I was just reminded of Dr. Jerry Tennant's video, which I did a talk about 3 weeks ago, about how we're energetic beings and how the body has 4 battery packs. We're talking about these crystals being perfect. Anything in nature is perfect. We have 4 battery packs. There's the muscles, there's the cell membrane, which is like the capacitor, and then there's the mitochondria inside the cell, and then we have the DNA itself is a battery pack. This is the crazy stuff, because the DNA has the golden mean ratio, and wherever we find this in nature, it tells us that its scalar energy implodes into it. This is the energy of all life form, and this man-made radiation is affecting the DNA in our cells, so we're not going to be able to receive the scalar energy as we're meant to, because it's been damaged. And that is the bit that scares the living
Jesus
out of me.
And that gets passed on from generation to generation, right?
Yes, and then we have the epigenetics. Yes.
Yeah, so you're into a deterioration of the human race within, and there's some. I mean, no one can be sure about this, I don't think, but there's some outspoken people that are saying that that's the end. Fertility will be like, you talked about the experiment that you can do with sperm and see how its motility and mobility and everything else is affected. Well, that is the human race. It depends on that. It's like, and so, we've really got to understand what's going on here. We've really got to, wake up and be active and take control of our vibration. Get our vibration back into alignment, into centeredness, and understand what the knowledge is that's going to help us get out of this collectively, right? Because we all still want our data. I mean, I like my phone, I like my laptop, I like receiving data, I like talking to you on over the Wi-Fi or whatever. I mean, that is amazing. That's incredible. But our view at Omnia is that we've found a way to make that safe, so we should really be, spreading that news. And that's not to say that we're the only people that are making things safe and everything else, but I would just say, make sure that whatever you're choosing has been really well tested, and that's what we do. And because we understand exactly what it is in a radiation field that is causing this, compromise, we are able to then, reverse those effects. So
wow, that's incredible. Thank you so much for that work you're doing. That's invaluable for people.
Yeah.
I've had those gadgets on my phone before. I don't have one at the moment, which is crazy considering what I'm doing right now.
I can help you out there. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that you've been able to test it, because in my head I'm going, how do they know? How can they test this stuff? But it's very interesting what you've just said and how you test it, how the cells respond or don't. Just coming back to, we are vibrational beings, and remembering that we are electrical in every way, shape and form. Our thoughts, feelings, emotions, everything carries frequency with it. Every time we have a thought, every time we move a limb, it's electrical pulses of energy. Our heart is pumping with electricity. Everything is electricity. And we need to remember this. How can we get this information to the right people without them going, oh, you're a quack, or you can't back this stuff up? Because I'm getting, I've been told I'm a quack sometimes. I don't care, whatever. I'm helping people come off drugs. You can either go down the drug route, or you can go down the healing route. And if that makes me a quack, that's fine. How do we get this information into the right people? How do we get this to Mark Alira, at the CEO of EE right now, to say, dude, I know you're a lovely human, and I suspect there's a bad bone in your body. I just don't think you've understood this yet, because the research hasn't been put in front of you. How do we get this in a loving way to the right people? How do we get this to Michael Eavis right now at Glastonbury, when he can go, holy crap, I haven't considered any of this. Let's turn off the 5G, because ultimately it's electricity. It can be turned off. It's not like, oh, I'm pinned down, I'm in jail and I can't do anything. It's electricity. We can turn it off. How do we convey this?
You still have fun
to the right people,
looking at a program and going around Glastonbury without their mobile phones, I believe. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you mentioned something there which was crucial, which is that people either act out of fear or out of love, right? It's pretty simple. You know, it's a polarized sort of, existence that we live in, and the people with the fear are going to come at me and you and go, rubbish, BS, this, that, and the other, and they won't give any. They won't have looked at it properly. They won't have really thought about it. They won't have given it any, proper, sort of consultation or whatever. So we would say, well, good luck to those people. But for those people who are acting in love, who basically understand what we're trying to say, which is that, this is a situation which you are responsible for, because it's been very clear right now that the World Health Organization and some of the telcos, some of the big brands or whatever, I'm not going to call everyone out because I get myself into all sorts of trouble, but, these government bodies or authorities are not looking after us. There is, as you mentioned before, very clear science that shows that there are many, many complications that are showing up in rats when they test rats. Now, that deserves to have a forum. We need to have that discussed in the public, right? Rather than just blanket statements coming out saying, we have looked at the reports and we've decided that there's no problem. Well, it's like, which reports did you look at? Because we can show them which reports we want them to look at and say, did you look at these ones? And have you got a valid reason for saying that that's not true? Because, I think there's a really cool quote from Dr. Ole Johansson, who's one of the premium researchers, and I think he was heavily involved in the Bioinitiative report, who said that there's never been a time in medical research where this many studies have come to the same conclusion and got it wrong, right?
Right.
So what he's saying is basically statistically, it's very, 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 very unlikely that what they're finding, as in terms of disease, is wrong. So what I hope we've done today is given a little bit more understanding as to what the start of that is, what the start of those biological findings is, and let's explore it together. Because it affects all of us, right? I'm doing it from a place of love. I'm not doing it to, whatever.
Totally.
This is me trying to, recognize a situation, help everyone out, not just us as consumers, but potentially, your big guys at the top of the corporations. Does that person at the top of the corporation want his kids playing with their iPads in the back of his car to have their blood going from that to that when they put it on their lap, which incidentally is right next to their genitals, right?
Exactly. That's scary. So scary.
Is that person a human being? Because then they've got to look at this information. They've got to do it with love rather than fear of, I don't know, getting sued or whatever else it is. Let's find a way out of this. No blame, no whatever. Let's try and work 100%. Out how we can get our data without killing ourselves.
Yeah. And how can we? Yeah.
That's the challenge. And I believe, sorry to one last thing, I honestly believe that the human race has subconsciously set itself this challenge to come out of this whole thing with a solution that actually is in harmony with the planet and our own vibration. And funnily enough, I'll go back to the scientist that I work with, because he has some groundbreaking information on how we do that as well, as in, potentially how we could plug cell towers into another type of energy that doesn't dissonate with us. But that's another topic.
Yeah, it's an interesting point we just made. I mean, sometimes a light has to be shone so brightly on things that are clearly unconscious, clearly corrupt, clearly beyond imagination. They're clearly an unconscious thing that's happening, and I don't think it's evil people. I don't think there's people in telecom companies that are evil people. It's just that the technology has gone so fast, and we have demanded it. We have to take responsibility for that. I've got to take responsibility for having my shiny red 4G phone. So I've demanded it. I'm guilty. And it's just sometimes we have to go, right, 5G has taken this to a whole new level. And I think, just as you say, it needs to be brought to the limelight, you know, and then we can go, crikey, this, we really need to look into this. And, you know, 6 months ago, I wrote a report on how kids in a medical industry, they're being diagnosed with ADHD or depression and prescribed these antidepressants and even ADHD medication, like street legal meth at the age of 7 years old when the brain's still developing. You just have to go, okay, guys, you don't need a medical degree to go, this isn't a good idea. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to look at what happens to the human cells when exposed to EMFs. Yeah. Every one of us can go, that's a really bad idea.
We need to look at any science. We honestly need a ministry of common sense is what we need. Because it's just building, you know, people build defensive walls against, you know, information that's really, really quite clear. And then they try and work out how they can bat it off and this, that, and the other. But, you know, look, I empathize with everyone in this situation because, you know, the heads of corporations are probably sitting there going, well, yeah, there's something wrong, but I have to act on behalf of my shareholders, my customers, like this, that, and the other. And they're probably doing what you and I would do if we were in their position. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Really quite difficult. So that's why we have to try and like approach this, not with blame and accusations, but like with sort of like proactivity, you know, and work out where we go from here. But like I said, like you know, just having some kind of common sense forum where, you know, we could establish clear ways forward. I mean, the first thing to do is to just wire up as many devices as you can, you know, and the second thing is turn stuff off at night. And, you know, the third thing is to protect our schools, you know, because schools are handing out iPads left, right, and center. And it's just like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to do that. Like, so where there's an option, let's choose the right option. But, you know, the next thing to do is if you have to use your mobile phone, which I do and you do and everything else, then find a solution that works, that harmonizes the radiation field so that it doesn't, you know, affect your body. And that's what my company is all about. So, but find what works for you. You know, lots of people like shungite and other things and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I'm very, very confident in my own product. So, that's what I would advise, just having some kind of, I mean, where's the government in all this? You know, where is everyone's paralyzed? Everyone's paralyzed in inaction, you know, inertia or whatever. And maybe it's up to the likes of me and you to just get these conversations started and then sign up people who are interested and then move it forward. I don't know. Yeah. To do that.
I think it really requires every one of us to really look into this and not just bury our heads in the sand, which is the much easier option for now. But when everyone's ill in 2 or 3 years' time, we're going to know what it is. It's just let's not let it get to that. And we can all take action, you know, against our local authorities. We can write to our local MPs. We can write to local authorities. We can get this really looked at. There was a parliamentary hearing, I believe there was on Tuesday. You know, this is from people people actually stepping forward and going, this is not okay. This really isn't okay. And people already, there's already a condition called electrohypersensitivity, which is when some people cannot go into a Wi-Fi area because they get headaches or worse.
It's an absolute, you can't live if you've got that, you know, it's impossible. I know, you know, funny story, I guess, but there's people next door and they have a babysitter who's electromagnetically hypersensitive and she insists that everything's turned off when she comes over. And the kids that are being babysitted are like, so like they don't want, you know, they prefer another babysitter. But I mean, imagine it. It's just horrible. It's you know, to be suffering like that. My heart goes out to them. But hopefully we can get to a point where we reverse that.
Yeah. Excellent. This has been going on for quite some time. I could talk to you for hours. I'd like this to be at a length where people will share it and people will watch it, because if it gets too long, people won't. So, Tim, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be in front of your audience and share some knowledge. And if anyone's got any feedback for us, then shoot us a question. Anything that wasn't clear, then please inquire at hello@omniabalance.life.
And Omnia as it sounds, AOMNIA balance.life. Okay.
Yep.
Right. Thank you so much, Tim. Thank you everyone for watching. Please share this. Please share it with love. Please share it with consciousness, with an intention to really bring this to a halt. And this is not about fear. This is about raising awareness so action can be taken, so we can really, take a look into this and save the lives of hundreds of thousands, millions of people. And if you can get this in front of people at Glastonbury or EE, that would be wonderful as well. Thank you for everyone for watching, and please share. Please share. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Vitality Secret podcast. If you like this, please leave a 5-star rating. And if you loved it, please take a few minutes to leave a review. The more ratings and reviews that are left, the easier it is for this life-changing information to get into the hands of people who need it. Don't forget to join my free 7-day program and ignite your inner healer at vitalitysecret.com.